Hello, my name is Eddie. I'm the suspension tech here at WMR, and I'll be going over how to properly set your sag on your dirt bike. Whether it's new or used, these steps will be relatively the same. To properly set your rider sag on your dirt bike, we're going to be mainly focusing on the rear. But to start off, if you have an air fork for your stock bike, the front is just as important. So that's where I would start first. Mainly with having the bike on a center stand, making sure the suspension is fully extended. That's the way you want to adjust your air forks. So to start off with, you want to use, say, either the standard pressure specified by the manufacturer or air pressure that you've been running and that you like. But you definitely don't want to be too low of an air pressure or too high of an air pressure, because that will change how the rear sits. Say for this particular bike, we have a 24 250 SXF, and the stock air pressure is 10.5 bar. So as you can see here on this pump that I already have hooked up, we're just going to go to 10.5, and that would be our standard air pressure that we want to run for this stock bike. So that's a good starting point, especially if someone is buying this bike and it's brand new to them. Let's start there, especially if they're within the weight range of the stock spring. Be mindful of how much air pressure you're losing whenever you're adjusting air fork pressure when you're removing the pump. For, say, set and sag, I wouldn't get too crazy over that, but now we just want to remove the pump. But that would be our first step. So say if you have springs in the front, this step you wouldn't have to worry about, only if you have air forks on your bike. When it comes to set and sag, we're going to first start with getting our zero, basically meaning our full extension. What is our full extension? We want to pick 2 points that are fixed. We don't want to check here and then the next one check over here. We want to be checking at the 2 same points at all times for our data to be consistent, for our numbers to be the same. So we're going to get our zero. You can use a tape measure, but I like to use a scale because it makes it a little bit easier, especially when I'm dealing with a lot of customers, one after the other. Just makes the math a little easier. So say I'll be setting my zero. One neat thing with the KTM and the Austrian brand is that they actually have a marking. So say a point of reference when setting sag. I also like to choose the center of the axle. That's a good point here, especially with when this has a cone. Just fits same over here at all times. And then we have this marking up here. So this basically will be from this point to this point, my full extension travel. So meaning, again, this thing will not extend any further than that. So that can't go any more travel than that. Say if you have a fender and there's no mark, you can also use a Sharpie or another point that you can remember, but just make sure that it's the same point that you're measuring from at all times. So with our full extension, when I'm checking to get my zero, what I mean by that is, say, here's my zero, the bike's only gonna sag down. It's not gonna start raising back up. So with the bike's own weight, it's probably gonna be sagging between 30 to 40 millimeters. With the rider, then the bike will sag down to, say, what we wanna be 105 millimeters. Once we have our full extension measurement with either a tape measure or a scale like I am using in this example, now it's time to get the bike off the center stand. Typically, I'll have somebody hold the front end of the bike lightly while I'm checking the rear for the free or static sag. In this example, I'll just have the side stand on the right side, just so I'm not fighting the bike. So we want to go back to our consistent points, which meaning, center of our axle like I'm using here. And then if you have a groove, keep using that, or your Sharpie mark that you've made. So you want the bike straight up and down, typically somebody holding it from the front lightly. As you can see here, I have it on a side stand just to make it a little easier for myself. So this measurement, number-wise, isn't accurate. But just to show you, for example, the bike has sagged 40 millimeters. So we started off at 0, Now it has sagged to 40. So as you can imagine, once we have more weight on there, it's gonna keep sagging lower and lower. So after we have our full extension measurement, our static free sag measurement, now it's time to get our rider measurement. In a field example, I would have somebody holding the bike from the front lightly, while I have the rider in full gear sitting on the bike. Many different ways to do it. Some stand up, some sit down, but to me the biggest thing is just be very consistent with it. If you sit, then sit all the time. If you stand, then stand all the time, because you want these numbers to be as consistent as possible. Like in this example, typically I'll have a rider sit very neutral in the center of the bike, just like how Danny is here in this example. I'll go back to the rear to take my measurement. So, like I did in the static and free sag, just push down the bike and let it come up on its own. Center of the axle, find our marking or Sharpie mark, and then check out our scale or tape measure and see where you're at. So in this example, I'm at 90 millimeters. So that is too tight or too stiff. Typically you want to be right around 100 to 105. Spec is 105 millimeters. So in this example, I would have to loosen the spring in order to get the bike to go from 90 millimeters to sag just a little bit more and go to 105 millimeters, because we want the bike to sag just a little bit more, so we have to take some pressure off the spring. If we were sagging at 110 millimeters, so more than spec, a bigger number, we would actually have to add tension to the spring in order to create more holdup. You'll get to a point, say if you're way on the light end of the spec or the heavy end of the spec for your current spring, stock spring, then it's time to switch over to either a stiffer rate spring or a softer rate spring, which can be found in your owner's manual, or you can contact us at WMR and we'd be glad to help you out with choosing the correct spring for your ride and for your riding style. Also something to take in consideration, sometimes taller riders, shorter riders, that can also come into play. When talking about adding spring tension or removing spring tension, you're going to want to go to your collar, whether it's the stock plastic collar with a 4mm Allen that holds it tight, or this style on the Pro Shock. With the Pro Shock, it's an 8mm head, but concept's still the same. These threads are regular threads, so clockwise to go down, counterclockwise for the collar to come up. With the stock collar, you're going to want to release this 4mm Allen, and then to release spring tension, counterclockwise, as you can see, spring gets looser. If we want to go more spring tension, we're going to go clockwise. So that's finishing off how to properly set sag on your motorcycle. If any questions, you can always call us or contact us at WMR1.com. I also have a blog article at our website that goes a little more in depth when it comes to properly checking rider sag.